In recent years, there has been a significant rise in the number of people who partake in a gluten-free diet. Some are acquired by certain conditions that they might suffer from, and others choose to from following diets and trends which suggest it. For today's video, I actually decided to put my degree to use for the first time in a year and break down the science in a way that everyone should be able to understand behind the most prevalent condition leading to people requiring a gluten-free diet and any advantages, if any exist, behind your average individual cutting it out. You might not expect it, but gluten itself is actually a protein and is used by grains such as wheat, rye or barley for protein storage in the endosperm cells. These are tissues found in the fertilised grain to provide them nutrition during development. In our food, gluten is a rubbery mass that remains after the grains have been washed to remove starch. The endosperm containing the gluten is used to produce flour for most bakery products, which is one of the reasons many cakes are not gluten-free. The gluten proteins are regarded as prolamines, which just means they are storage proteins which contain large amounts of the amino acid proline. Each different grain has slightly different prolamines, but they're all structurally similar and behave similarly upon digestion, which is why we bunch them all under the umbrella term of gluten. The last bit of science you need to know about gluten itself is that it has a complex structure, just meaning it's composed of different proteins, which in this case are split into two groups based on their solubility in alcohol, because science. These are soluble gliadins and insoluble glutenins. They'll be important when we look at why gluten gives some people such bother. And speaking of these people, let's take a look at celiac disease. Celiac disease is a multifactorial autoimmune disorder of the digestive system. But don't let those big words scare you off. Multifactorial just means it's dependent on a number of different factors, both genetic and environmental, and autoimmune means your immune system gets confused and accidentally attacks itself. Compared to most genetic disorders, celiac is pretty common, with roughly 1% of people in the world suffering from it. It's also what's called a statistical iceberg, as there's likely many more undiagnosed cases than there are diagnosed. Also, it's more prevalent in women as opposed to men, with some studies showing a ratio as high as 3.5 to 1, although it has been noted men tend to get more severe symptoms than women. The main theory behind the cases of this gender bias are the more drastic hormonal changes women undergo in their lifetime. What many people don't realise is that most genetic disorders are complex, meaning that multiple different changes have to occur to your DNA for you to suffer from them, and celiac is no exception, with over 40 different genes being linked to causing the disorder. The most important of these, though, are found at a specific point of your genome, the HLA locus, a point on the short arm of chromosome 6. HLA stands for the human leukocyte antigen, and this locus is where several genes encoding proteins for this complex are found. More than half of the proteins coded for in this region play roles in the immune response. These proteins play a major part in the systems which identify the antigens of intracellular and extracellular peptides. In case you didn't know, antigens are like a calling card on the exterior of a protein complex which the system uses to identify whether something should be there or shouldn't. This is why alterations to these genes lead to celiac disease, as if someone has any number of mutations to one of the key genes in the HLA locus, then the body will often misidentify proteins in the digestive system, leading to an unnecessary immune response, especially to those pesky gliadins we discussed earlier. Let's momentarily take a dive into the genetics of celiac disease to understand how the problems arise. And don't worry, we're not going to get too complex, you don't have to turn away from the video. The presence of two specific haplotypes being sets of DNA variations often inherited together and found on the same chromosome, are found in 98% of people who suffer from celiac disease. These haplotypes are known as HLA-DQ2 and HLA-DQ8. The remaining percentage of people carry one of the two alleles for the DQ2, which in those people is enough to cause the effect in those patients. These genes are code for the proteins which are responsible for self-recognition in the digestive system. This is important, as with incorrect recognition, the cells would assume otherwise normal proteins are foreign invaders, and as such, would attack them via an immune response. This misrecognition is what happens to celiac sufferers when gluten is ingested. See, gluten is a really tough protein, and most of our enzymes struggle to break it down, leaving the molecules partially broken up, but still mostly not useful for us. A peptide called zonulin, though, thinking the gluten has been fully hydrolyzed, increases the permeability of the gut, which allows the mostly broken down gluten proteins to be taken up to the mucosa, where they are changed to enhance their affinity for the HLA2 molecules. In most people, this is the point where the body recognises the partially broken down gluten proteins and puts them to use, taking the prolines from the proteins and converting them to glutamine, which is a different amino acid used in the brain. For sufferers of celiac disease, though, their HLA-DQ2 and DQ8 proteins recognise the gluten-derived proteins as toxic and so elicit an incorrect immune response from the body. From here, several boring and complex reactions occur, instigated by both our innate immune response, which is the non-specific part that tries to get rid of all foreign invaders, essentially your Brexit response, and the adaptive immune response, which is specialised. Also, you have your humoral immune response, which is a set of immunity cells known as T and B cells, which circulate around your body, awaiting an invasion of the foreign bodies. These reactions lead to the release of cytokines, which are just little proteins used in the immune response that cause your intestines to become inflamed. This inflammation is then followed by a few processes which cause damage to your intestinal lining and can lead sufferers of celiac disease to experience immense stomach pain, diarrhea, tiredness, and many other symptoms. Somewhat luckily, unlike people who suffer from gluten allergies, people with celiac disease are not at a risk of death from ingesting gluten, but the extreme discomfort caused means almost all sufferers will opt for a gluten-free diet. For a long time, the availability of gluten-free alternatives was limited. However, in recent years, a rise in awareness of celiac disease, as well as many people now opting to undertake a gluten-free diet for the health benefits, has led to an increase in the number of alternative choices for food. But what are these health benefits? Or are there any at all? Let's take a look. Dr. Daniel A. Leffler, Director of Clinical Research at the Coeliac Center at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, Boston, doesn't seem to think there are. People who follow the fad diet of swapping to gluten-free alternatives claim that it helps them to lose weight as well as boosting their energy levels. There is, however, no scientific backing behind any of these claims. The only possible links that could be made is by cutting out gluten-containing products such as pizza and beer. The person is likely be eating healthier foods as a replacement, which may provide them with a better natural source of energy and be less calorie dense. But any of these hypothetical benefits are due to the new food being better for you, rather than gluten being bad. Not only is a gluten-free diet not healthier for you, it could actually be detrimental, as cereals and fortified breads have become a major source of B vitamins in the Western world. A deficiency in this is problematic for everyone, but can cause major issues for pregnant women, as vitamin B9, also known as folic acid, is key in preventing birth defects. As well as this, whole wheat is a major source of dietary fibre, which your bowels need to be able to work properly. Dr. Leffler even states that the average American diet is already deficient in fibre. Take away the whole wheat and the problem gets a lot worse. And whilst it is possible to get your fibre from other sources, such as quinoa or fruit and veg, given the average American already doesn't get enough, they'd have to be going out of their way to do so. Add on the additional costs for gluten-free products and their limited availability, and it seems that going gluten-free by choice not only doesn't produce the benefits certain fad dietitians would have you believe, but many nutritionists and experts in the field would say it is inadvisable. Another aspect many people may not consider, which I've witnessed firsthand, is that many restaurants will not have large stocks of gluten-free products to reduce the waste and due to their higher price. So by you electing to have a gluten-free option because you think it's better or you might just prefer it, you may be depriving someone of their only option for a meal if the restaurant has to 86 a dish. Just some gluten-free food for thought. And that's all for today. I hope you guys have enjoyed. If so, leaving a like and subscribing goes a really long way to helping the channel grow. If you'd like to see more concept of biology explained in a more manageable way, let me know in the comments. Or just comment anything, as apparently the YouTube algorithm really loves comments. Tell me, do you prefer black or white socks? Otherwise, have an awesome day, and I'll see you in the next one.